This episode is, it's really special because I'm talking about a guy who moved to a city where he had no relationships. He had very little resources, but he had a dream about a city. And, you know, so many people have heard of Redding, California. This guy not only heard about it, he dreamed about it. He moved here and he started creating real estate development in a way where people looked at him like he was kind of naive, and he even got sued and probably proved him wrong, but he stuck with it. His story is so inspirational, but I think what a lot of people are going to get out of this is what happens when you dream and you act and you make a decision to make something happen. You're going to hit some obstacles. It's going to go in multiple ways that you didn't imagine. But on the other side of it, you're going to gain something so much more valuable than money. You're going to gain wisdom and experience. And this guy's really done it. So Joshua Johnson this is a great episode, and I hope you guys like it. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Enjoy this episode. This is the Money Hole Podcast. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and download and leave us a comment. Today, I'm really excited to hang out with my friend Joshua Johnson. Thanks for coming, man.
Hey, it's a pleasure.
Appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
How long have we known each other now? I think I met you, 8 years ago?
Yeah, exactly.
Was it exactly 8 years ago?
Yep, we moved here 8 years ago.
Wow, man. Well, I've been wanting to get you on here for a while. You're a very interesting guy. You know, you came here 8 years ago, and within 8 years, you've really, from my perspective, being a mortgage lender, and you've done a lot to add value to our community.
Thank you.
And that's what I think people see when they hear about you, is someone who, you know, there's people out there that are developers and that are doing real estate because they're trying to make money, which there's nothing wrong with that you got to make money. But then there's people like you where you can tell that you're actually trying to improve this community and you believe in it. Mm-hmm. And I remember one of our first conversations when we hung out, you told me the story about moving here and what you saw here and the potential you saw here. Mm-hmm. And 8 years ago wasn't that long ago, but man, so much has changed in 8 years.
Absolutely.
So, man, I'd love to hear just a little bit more about your background, you know, because you're doing real estate development. Mm-hmm. You help builders, you consult lots. Even as recent as yesterday, a friend of mine was telling me that you were helping her out with some farm stuff in Indiana.
Yeah. And
so tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into development and what brought you to Redding.
Well, it's an odd story. My background out of college, got a degree in government and business, and when I graduated, decided to start a software company. So I did that for about 12, 13 years.
Where was this?
Most of that career was done in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay.
So we moved to Redding from Cincinnati. I'm originally a California boy, but spent some time in the Midwest there and had a great life there. Actually, my entry into real estate happened in Cincinnati. The way I got my first home was I partnered with my father-in-law who had cash and I had time, and we went in on a foreclosure during the 2008 crash.
Okay.
And I did the sweat equity, played GC, did all the remodel, and then I ended up buying that house off of my father-in-law, and my profit was my equity in the home.
Nice.
And ended up selling that home for a really great profit that helped us when we moved out here and to invest in our first project, first land development project. But really, what happened in between that as I was building my software company, there was probably over a period of time a little bit of this, man, I love building digital things and being in this tech space, but there's so much, there is somebody in this world that's deciding how our cities feel and how they look and how we live in them. And who is that? Is that the government? Is that some random guy, an investor somewhere just deciding this? What is this? And I found out about this role of a developer and how they kind of imagine space. And I lived a stone's throw away from this little community, suburban town of like 3,000 people outside of Cincinnati, called Marymount. And it was a master plan community by a guy who was inspired by the Garden City movement, which if you look up the book is Ebenezer Howard wrote this book on this in England about how cities, how kind of the ideal city would be designed and planned. It inspired Walt Disney to build Epcot, and before Epcot, it was going to be in the experimental prototype city of tomorrow. Before it was the theme park. Disney's dream was to build a garden city, essentially this prototype city that people would come to learn about and go and reproduce in other places of the world. That was his big dream before he passed away. So this guy built one of those little micro urban communities outside of Cincinnati, was kind of the master planner behind it. He didn't own it. He was the consultant on it. And it really gave me this kind of like inspiration for this role. And, but I would say I never even thought about it though, until I had this, to be honest, a dream. And in that dream, it was just I have a lot of dreams. We all have a lot of dreams. They don't make sense.
Yep.
Most of our dreams are wild. You're like riding a unicorn in the middle of space, or you're falling and you want to wake up as quickly as possible. Yep. This dream was one of those dreams where I woke up, I remembered every detail. It was very fascinating. And in it, I was with a bunch of people and we were building a city together. Wow. We built this beautiful city. I woke up, I was so inspired. I was like, how do we build cities? Who does that? And I think it just took me on this, that was in 2014. It just took me on this journey that I'm on now, which is how do I play a part in making my city better wherever I am? And, looking at land and imagining what can be possible, but then doing that with the fundamentals of real estate and how it all works. Because we can live pie in the sky in this blue sky world. It's like, oh, everything's possible. And that's not true. Like we live with obstacles. And that's where the creative opportunity comes is when we see an obstacle and actually how to work within it. Yeah. You know, a lot of times, you know, in our software company, we talk about, you know, so many people talk about how to think outside the box, but actually it's about how to explore all that the box has available to you. All the walls actually create opportunity in some cases. It's not confining. And sometimes it's like you put the study that had the children in the playground without a fence. They felt less safe, less secure. They didn't have as much imagination and play. Whereas you put a fence around it, all of a sudden they're exploring all that playground has to offer because they know the boundaries. And I think sometimes development just creates that. There are more boundaries in California than in Missouri or in Ohio or these places, but which makes it more difficult, more challenging, but it's not impossible. And I think that's what I've been exploring here in Redding is so transitioning from real estate from software to real estate was really kind of the big jump for me. And I remember I had a mentor of mine back in Cincinnati because I was having, this, semi-imposter syndrome. And I go, who am I to think I can go from software to something so big as land and development and building, construction and all this stuff. And he was a pretty high up executive one time at Procter & Gamble. And he looked at me and he goes, I don't know if I've ever met a developer that was born that way. Yeah. And I think it just opened my mind and my eyes to realize that they've always come from something else. Yep. And that was really, really helpful in that moment. It's kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I had a reminder this morning of that very thought. We do these through Braveco, we do these shooting schools. One of the things that we tell people who have never shot long range rifles before is what makes you think you're going to be good at this your first time doing it? Because as men, I think we show up and we have this competitive thing in us where we think we need to be able to do well at anything. Yeah. And I was golfing this morning and I had to remind myself, I was like, what makes me think
golf will humble a great man.
And I don't do it very often. I just like hanging out with my friends. But, I love what you said about the box equaling opportunities. Obstacles equal opportunities. I've really been thinking through that this year. Obviously, the mortgage industry right now is because of the fiscal policies and tightening financial world. We are seeing a lot of those obstacles. And, in California specifically, how to do real estate and invest in real estate, it's hard.
Right.
And there's so many obstacles, whether it's the cost to build, regulation, the time it takes to get through processes that take an hour in most states. You know that way
over
more,
the county permits.
You know that way more than I know. But this last year, like I've been really seeing people that are taking advantage of these obstacles and they're looking at these regulations that are coming down that most people look at and say, man, that's going to make things harder. And they're like, no, there's an angle there. There's a way to actually take advantage of that. And yeah, it's super interesting to, like, for example, like AB, what is it? SB9 and AB 211. These are some of the I've been learning about.
Yep.
And you go down to Sacramento, and you even here in Redding a little bit, but you go down to some bigger markets and you see these townhomes, and you see these mass developments downtown in these areas that were once, pretty rough, and they're new and vibrant. You're like, who on earth is doing this, and why? How does that make sense? And so it's a pretty interesting thing for people to kind of look at the angles. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about, so you had these dreams and visions. Your friend told you, I don't know any developers that, were ready for that. Obviously visions take financing. And so help me. One of the things we talk a lot about here is, people's relationship with money. Yeah. In the mortgage industry, 22 years now, I've seen it run to extremes, and now I coach. And so I see a lot of people who have weird belief systems around money that really end up either, it's affecting their life one way or the other. Yeah. And, some people will say, I don't have enough, and they have a belief system that there's not enough there. Now, I don't know you super well, but what I do know of you is you have learned how to be resourceful and kind of like some of the projects you've done, correct me if I'm wrong, but like you've raised capital and you've found a way to make it happen, even if you didn't have your own capital to do it. So I'd love to talk about that, because I think the economy we're heading into right now, it's really important that people start to become resourceful and realize that there is opportunity. They just have to stop thinking the way they're thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. And I think that the starting point is the vision that I had and what I wanted to do was bigger than what I was able to resource myself. I had some resources. You definitely, whether you're doing a tech startup or you're building, subdivision or doing, multifamily development or whatever it is that your plans are, having skin in the game is important. Making sure your investors feel like you're invested with them when you get paid, when they get paid. And oftentimes they get paid first. And that's how it should be. And especially with me, it was my, on my first, project, I took a lot lesser percentage share of the project, had to structure the deal in such a way to get in the game. And that was really important. A lot more sweat equity, types of structure that I wouldn't do going forward, but was necessary, and I don't regret it at all. It was the way it needed to be done, because there wasn't a lot of history. You don't have a slew of projects.
You had to prove yourself.
Had to prove yourself, and more so to eliminate risk off the table. Right? It's another way of building credit. And not everything happens. It goes as planned. Your pro formas are crap. You can do your best. Timelines, performance, everything. You have so many things that could happen. I had, have one project that has done the opposite of my plan, and I had another project that exceeded my plan. I've been a part of projects that are kind of pretty close to plan, and as I step into them now, I have a lot more sobriety, and that's just kind of how it goes. And each project it was led by the same process. We went through the same kinds of steps, but different things happen different times in the market, all of these things. And I think that's why, having your eggs in just one basket, not having, is so critical for my family that I had cash flowing businesses as I was stepping into development. Development, for me is probably a life calling, I feel like. And for me, that's not always related to my day-to-day income. The way that I've been able to provide for my family is sometimes different than the things that I want, the way I want to make my mark on the earth. And sometimes they coincide, and they have in development as well. But it's not one of those things where you get a consistent paycheck.
Right.
So getting my real estate license was important. Becoming a contractor was helpful. Being able to start to do multiple things that all are within the vein, or what you call vertically integrated. things that would benefit my future developments has been my path, like a 10-year pathway of just building the skills and refining, but staying kind of optimistic, keeping my eyes open to opportunities is probably a better way of saying it. And while also putting in the work to getting better at things that I didn't have the education or training in the past. So I've kind of had to do that with my own time. And that's, I mean, man, the things that I'm reading and studying up on, you know, in my nights and weekends is probably very different than a lot of other people, but it's because I love this. I want to get better at it. And want to keep learning.
How much, tell me about some of the failures along the way. Cause you know, if you're anything like me, if I had to go back and start over again, I'm so grateful for my journey, but man, I'm so glad I did not know what was ahead, because it's hard, man. You know, this entrepreneur world and hiring people, and there's so much risk, you know, and it's no wonder that 98% of society would rather just punch a clock and take a paycheck. Like, I don't blame them.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear, you know, about some of the failures and the places where you're like, oh no, like this is going to ruin me.
Yeah. Well, I think that I would say one of the things that I wasn't prepared for, and I call it a failure of naivety, and just which oftentimes it's we want our dreamers of the world to be somewhat naive, or they probably, if they're fully aware of the
you have to be
the pain that would be coming, they probably wouldn't step into it.
It's a gift.
So so I think that I was grateful that I had mentors that helped give me some wisdom without trying to tell me all the pain that I could potentially endure. Because, you know, I wasn't prepared for, as you step into bigger risks, you are exposing yourself to more pain and more potential, you know, I would say just more exposure in general. So I think the first thing that really hit me so hard was a lawsuit that I was not expecting. I've been in business for a very long time and avoided, you know, been through, you know, when you're doing service companies, there's going to be disputes every so often. You have to work things out. You might have to, you know, if you're providing a service, refund something or do something over a 13-year period and how many projects we've done. I was able to avoid any type of action because of relationship, and you work things out and you figure it out and you come to the table and you're as reasonable as you can to do that. Well, I couldn't do that in this particular situation, and had to go through a 3-year delay and pause to deal with an action that was blindsiding to me. And I didn't have a contingency plan for it. Never had been through something like that, especially related to property in the state of California, which is probably actually where most of our litigation comes from. So really is. I remember people saying, you know, California is really litigious. I was like, yeah, okay. You know, I didn't know what that meant.
Now you do.
But I felt it. And, you know, when I look back now, as much as that hurt, I can honestly say that I'm grateful to have learned what I learned in that. And I remember having a friend, you know, this is probably a theme. I've been grateful for a lot of friends that have been able to speak into my life very, very poignantly in times of need. But I had a friend I sat across and I was like, I'm a terrible developer. I must be a terrible businessman. I can't believe I got myself in this. I've put my investors at risk. I've done this and this and this. And I was very frustrated and just kind of beat myself up. And he looked at me and he goes, well, he says, I said, have you ever been in a lawsuit? He goes, I've been in 8. 8 lawsuits? What? And he goes, yeah. And one almost killed me. I was like, oh, geez. So it just made me realize, like, and this is a guy that had taken tons of risk and had built great businesses and had a great reputation, but things happen.
They do.
Things happen. And I think that it just gave me, I let myself off the hook a little bit to say, you need to get through this, and you need to do this well, but don't beat yourself up. This is a failure you can walk through, and you can come out at the other side, and this too shall pass. Yep. So I think that's what I did. And it took longer than I wanted, but we got through it.
3 years. What were the things that you did during that season? Because I've been in one. In fact, I've been in many of those seasons where I've been sued, but where, maximum stress, tons of uncertainty,
A lot of loss of sleep. Yeah.
The feeling like you're alone and you're going to fail miserably. Everyone's going to know, and you're going to look like a fool.
Yeah.
And nobody can, even though you have all the friends around you, you're just like, you still feel like, man, I'm in the ring fighting a guy that's twice as big as me, and there's no one else in this ring with me. And man, I hate being in those places, but I would love for you to, what were the things that you did when you were in that lawsuit that helped you hold on to hope and keep moving forward and stay optimistic and have some, just have some life?
Yeah, one of them that I can think of right away, I remember waking up in the middle of the night, probably the peak of my stress, the absolute peak. I was spending so much time dealing with this situation that I had pulled back from my software company, which was still the primary breadwinner for our family financially, but I pulled back. So less income. All of a sudden, the project was at a stalemate.
Yeah.
And I remember having this idea, a pivot, this idea of my way through this was going to look different than I had imagined. And so that's when I actually had the idea to get my real estate license, is that instead of walking away or running away, doubling down. So when I was feeling like the least qualified or the least, I would say, able to push through, I felt a strong urge to go harder at the thing that was causing pain, which I kind of lumped all real estate into that at that time because it was the genesis of it. But I'm so grateful that I did, because in that process, it just got me thinking differently, got me seeing other things. And that's when, during that I bought a piece of land with a friend across the street from Woody's, which is a restaurant in downtown Reading on Oregon Street. I bought a little piece of land for $70,000. And that there's a number of things that happened, but I'll jump to an interesting point in that was related to my pain. Is that after I had developed it, that little piece of property, and mapped it from ground up while I was in this delay, it allowed me, when I went to sell it, it gave me the cash that I needed to pay the debt on the land, which then I converted to me getting a lot in the subdivision and building the first house in the subdivision, which tipped it forward. And that was, when I look at that story, I go, man, I could not have written that.
No.
Could not have written that. And I'm so grateful for the little steps, but I don't think I would have had the ability to even see that property if I hadn't gone through that sleepless night with that idea to double down.
Yeah. Yeah, man. That pain is, I mean, gosh, we don't ever want to tell people that that's something they have to do. But I just think that one of the benefits of that pain is it pushes us to think differently. And I'm assuming when you were losing sleep at night, you're talking about fear, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And the problem with fear is, one of the things you said is you stopped being engaged with your tech company where you were making money, right? And so it's like, when I'm in fear, I'm seeing the problem bigger than it is, and I can't see things clearly. And I've had a situation recently that I've been going through where I had a bunch of fear, and it was very similar. It was a plan that did not work out the way I thought. And about 2 weeks ago, I had this elk hunt planned with some really good friends. We do it every year for like 15 years. And it felt very irresponsible to go. And in the end, I was talking to my wife, we've lost some friends. It's just been a lot this last month. And she looked at me and she said, you need to go on this trip and you need to stay as long as you can. And it's a place where I would not have cell reception. And I'd be in the middle of the woods for like 6 days. So I said, okay. I felt like that was kind of, important directives. And I listened to her and I went. The first 2 days, I was maximum anxiety.
Yeah.
And the third day I got the flu.
Yeah.
And I had to lay in this Montana canvas tent with a heater going because it was super cold up there, shivering in my bed. I finally woke up the next day and I felt clear. I felt good. And so I went out hunting and I sat in a tree stand for 8 hours. And then I did it for 3 more days. By the third day, I realized that I wasn't that important and that my problems were not that big. And by Monday, when I came in, I sat down with a bunch of people, made a bunch of calls, and literally I saw a different way. And this is Friday and that was Monday. And oh my gosh, man, it's just, it was one that I've been telling everyone this story. It's counterintuitive sometimes to walk away from the problem.
Yeah.
And to not go headlong into it and to do something like get into the woods by yourself. Cause there's a lot of people stressed out right now. I've had this conversation with 3 people this week who are super stressed. I have a friend that runs a big company, but a bunch of people. I'm like, hey man, how often are you on your phone right now? What's your sleep like? I'm burned out. I'll say, okay, when's the last time you got away by yourself with no distractions? I can't even imagine doing that right now. I said, well, that's probably what you should do. And it was such a good lesson for me, man.
Absolutely,
just to detox
Yep.
and to regain perspective so that I could come back and that creative part of my mind could be open and see things clearly. So
anxiety only adds to the fog. It's impossible to see through it.
You create problems that aren't even there.
Yeah.
Like you stopped working on your tech business.
Yeah.
So it's like now you're not making income. So it's like you actually create more problems, right?
Yeah. Right.
That's cool, man. So I want to wrap up, but there's 2 things I want to touch on because I think you have a very unique perspective. You're very creative in some of the things you're doing in real estate, and you are a real estate agent, although you mostly work with developers and kind of specialized clients. People that are afraid to buy real estate or thinking they need to do it, whether it's to invest in non-owner or buy a place to live. And then Redding, I want to finish with Redding because man, there's not a day that goes by right now that I don't talk to someone that lives somewhere else in the nation and they're hearing about what's happening here. I want you to talk a little bit about your vision for Redding.
Yeah. I think I've been helping a lot of clients the way that I work with investors sometimes that are looking to buy property, and there's opportunity for short-term rental, long-term rental, development, ability to subdivide a lot, or maybe imagine a project that could come out of the ground there, or map a project, they call it in the development world, the entitlement process. But we're always looking at it when we're building it now. Coming through and having about 7-8 years experience doing this is kind of looking at multiple markets, multiple ways this project can succeed, multiple off ramps. I think it's really important. For instance, during 2020, all the rage was short-term rentals because people were traveling a lot and there's high nightly rates, and people were wanting unique experiences, and there was such a high demand for it that a lot of investors were buying these properties in and around Redding and also Mount Shasta and other places. I always like to look at a deal and say, well, what will this property become when that market maybe squeezes or turns into something else like it is now, where the nightly rates have gone down, where the cash on cash returns are different. Can it survive with a midterm rental? Does it look good still as a long-term rental? And if it doesn't and you still like it, that's fine. Maybe you'll have to sell it. Maybe you'll have to, just deal with lower cash flow or negative cash flow. Can you absorb that? But just looking into the future, because buying when markets are high and imagining them always to remain in that place is fantasy. So I think it's okay to have things for a short term. And I'm sure that, Redding's experienced a little bit of growth in that way. Our tourism, our TOT tax, our transit occupancy tax has gone up year over year, even as we have a local nonprofit here as a large church that used to drive a lot of that TOT is not as much of a factor as it once was. Our TOT went up when that church didn't have any events for 2 years. So there's now a mix of tourism. We're getting on the map in magazines and LA Times, and people are starting to hear about us. And Mount Shasta, the ski resort's investing in their park, and it's adding value there. And I think there's a lot of reasons that Redding will continue to be interesting in that market. But I think looking at buying these properties, can they work in the ebbs and the flows of the changing times? Because they'll always be there. I think what I see for Redding is where people will continue to invest and get creative, and not be afraid to pioneer things. It doesn't mean you have to do things that are irresponsible with your real estate. Mm-hmm. Don't ignore fundamentals, but there's usually more than one way, and usually more than one way than what you've heard by other, Instagram, influencers. Yep. Or different things. You have to look at it a microscopic way for your market. When I think about the macro of things, just like you do, you're looking at the macro market of, rates and home prices and sales and the price drops here or there. But Redding is going to still have a microcosm of that, and it's going to be responding differently. Yep. What I see, what Redding, really needs is it needs people to continue to imagine the next iteration, and the way people are going to live, and the way that they, where that right now we're at a place where affordability is tough throughout the state of California, and Redding is still competitive at a macro level to that end. Yep. But even in Redding, if we need to continue to think innovatively of how people do housing. And I think that this is the reason why I'm so excited about some of the manufacturing of housing offsite is being done, the concrete printed houses, and how that's being done right here out of Redding. There's some of this innovation, and I think that there's more to be done if the investors and developers were to continue to think innovatively. We could be, I think this city could be a great breeding ground for a template of things that can be done in other cities. And we have enough land to test things on. We can try things out, and our costs are lower generally. Our land costs are lower. So I think there's opportunity for us to do that. I think one of the things that we need to readopt and reimagine, and I know that for a lot of people that are used to a lot of acres, I know you have land. I love land, all these things. But the way that our kids and our kids' kids, many people who have, middle-class jobs, the way that they're going to step into homeownership, which is part of the American dream, is to think maybe a little smaller.
Yeah, at least in the beginning.
Yeah. And stepping into, 2-bed, 2-bath with an ADU in the back that can pay your mortgage.
With a neighbor on the other side of the wall, possibly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that when I was younger, there was a lot more latitude for how much of my neighbor noise I was able to endure.
Yeah. And there was convenience, being able to walk places. There's nothing wrong with doing high density, and I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of these younger people, first-time buyers, will make, is going into it with the thought process they're going to buy their dream house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree with that. I think, and also we are missing in the market the downsize. The retiree fixed income, I'm downsizing house. Yep. I'm done. I don't need a 3,000 square foot house in our city in Gold Hills anymore.
Yep.
I actually could do with a 2-bed, 2-bath with a first floor master, and my grandkids can still come visit, and I've got a cute yard, and I can take care of it, and I got plenty of space, and then I'm going to be traveling and visiting family.
Yep.
And doing things with a significant other. And I think that's something we got to reimagine, those kinds of spaces. I would hope that Redding would not be sprawly. I would hope that anything that's, a 50-acre or more project would be a master plan community with a mix of sizes of houses, and not just a homogenous, everyone's got to make, $150,000 a year in order to buy. That there could be a mix of housing. There could, right now it doesn't pencil a lot to build multifamily, but what may pencil is if you do single family parcels, you make them smaller, build a house plus an ADU, then you get 2 doors out of 1. What if you did a house, a junior attached ADU on the back side of your garage and an ADU in the back? Now you have 3 units for one parcel. In the state of California, that's legal.
Yep, it is. And it's a lot easier to do than it used to be. So, well, Josh, man, thanks for making time with your busy schedule to be here. If anyone wants to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah, they could get me at Josh, Josh, at EmmausUSA.com, which is spelled EMMAUSA.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being here, bud.
Hey, thank you.
Appreciate you.
All right.